Back to Sally and John. Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Breakfast with John Kay and Sally Nugent.
Now, at 7:30, thousands of prisoners are expected to be released early from tomorrow in efforts to ease overcrowding. But this has prompted fears about homelessness and reoffending.
Yes, the government says it has inherited a justice system in crisis and must alleviate the pressure on jails. But there are concerns that those released won't be able to find accommodation. Georgia Ponchia reports.
Each year, thousands of people are released from prison with nowhere to live. It's broken, from the point of arrest to the point of release. But without enough prison spaces or suitable accommodation, it's feared that this will continue to be a reality. Georgia Ponchia, BBC News.
Well, to talk about this, we are joined now by the Police and Crime Minister, Dame Diana Johnson. Morning to you. I hope you were able to hear the report that we've just played just now. So we know, don't we, that tomorrow criminals who've only served 40% of their sentence are going to be released from prison. What are you doing? What can you do to stop them reoffending and going straight back in?
Well, first of all, can I just put this into context, that this is what we've inherited after 14 years of a Conservative government, and we're 10 weeks into a Labour government. We're obviously having to take these very difficult decisions. And clearly what we want to do is to make sure that the community and individuals are protected. So there's a huge amount of work that's already been undertaken by the Home Secretary, by the Safeguarding Minister, by the Ministry of Justice ministers, to make sure that there is full appraisals going on of the individuals who will be released, and certain categories, of course, are excluded, including those who've committed domestic abuse offences, terrorism and serious violence. But for those who will be released tomorrow, there are probation have been working very hard to make sure that there are plans in place. People are released on licence and can be recalled if they commit further offences. So there's a whole range of things that are already in place to make sure that tomorrow goes as well as we can expect. But clearly nobody wants to be doing this.
Do you know exactly how many prisoners will be released tomorrow?
I understand it's in the region of about 1,700.
And you talked there about how those who are guilty of the most serious crimes will not be eligible for release, but we do know that that's changing slightly, isn't it? We know that initially the government said the early release scheme won't apply to the most serious offenders, but if offenders have served time and have a less serious crime that's a sentence that's running concurrently, they might be eligible for release.
Well, clearly the Ministry of Justice have been working through exactly who will be released. I know from the Home Office perspective, as I say, the Home Secretary and the Safeguarding Minister have been trawling through all of this to make sure that, for instance, around domestic abuse, there are safeguards in place to ensure that if there are any concerns, particularly around those perpetrators of domestic abuse who might not be in prison for a domestic abuse offence, but perhaps there is a history of abuse, that there are measures in place to inform the victims of domestic abuse, to refer to the MARACs, which are the local area, the local committee in a particular area where they can assess risk. If there's children involved, there's referrals through to social services and councils. So there's a whole range of things that are being done to protect the public.
I know that today you're announcing a new coalition to tackle knife crime. It's interesting timing, is it, being able to do that, a crackdown on knife crime in the week that criminals are going to be released from jail?
Well, clearly knife crime over the last decade has increased, and as the Prime Minister has said, it's a national emergency that we deal with this. So today the Prime Minister in Downing Street with the Home Secretary is having his first meeting to address this problem, inheritance from the last government. What I know in the Home Office, for example, is that we have an overspend of £6.4 billion that the previous government had not accounted for, had not made money available for that. So I think the Chancellor across government is having to make some really difficult decisions. She's identified £22 billion that we need to find, and so I don't think anybody wants to see this proposal around the winter fuel allowance brought in. But actually, as the Prime Minister has said, we're going to have to make some tough decisions.
But they are decisions. They are choices. They are decisions. It's a decision that your government is making.
Yeah, and it's a tough one, but it's one I think that the Chancellor obviously feels we need to make. And can I also just say she's set in train work around encouraging and getting people entitled to pension credit to apply for that. There's work in with the energy ministers looking at a social tariff to try and deal with the fact that our energy bills are so high and to bring those down. So and we know that this government is committed to the triple lock on pensions as well. So I think there are various things that we can see in train alongside this really very difficult decision. And I understand for many MPs this is a really hard decision. I myself have had lots of constituents contact me, so I know how difficult this is.
Are you surprised by the reaction, and is there any possibility that you might reconsider this decision?
No, I'm not surprised by the amount of concern that there is about this. And obviously, we do not want to see anyone struggling with energy bills, particularly pensioners. The winter fuel allowance, we know, is not a targeted benefit at the moment, but it's going to be targeted. And that's why it's so important that the poorest pensioners are getting everything they're entitled to support them. So through the pension credit. And we know that there are hundreds of thousands of pensioners who are not claiming that and should do. But alongside that, we generally want to get energy bills down. We know over the past few years what trouble that's caused to household budgets and the cost of living crisis. So there is a lot of work going on around that social tariff for the
Prisons have been running at 99% capacity. Over 88,000 people are behind bars, a record high. To tackle this, the government are releasing certain prisoners early, after they've served 40% of their sentence. Around 5,500 will be let out early over the next 2 months.
What we're seeing, particularly at the moment, where there is a sudden rush with lots of prisoners having had their sentences recalculated, there's a danger then that we do get this bottleneck, that we do get a lot of prisoners released from prison around the same time, and therefore they won't be able to find accommodation.
Ministry of Justice data shows that over 6,000 people, which represents 10% of all prison leavers across England and Wales, were released from custody straight into rough sleeping in the year to March 2023. That increased to over 8,000, which represents 12% of all prison leavers in the year March to 2024.
What we're seeing often in jails is that prisoners are simply going out homeless. They're going back out onto the streets, and then they're back within the prison within a matter of days.
This is a soup kitchen in Brighton. It's used by former inmates. One of them, Stephen, now volunteers here.
I come out getting into trouble again deliberately to get put back inside. It's not a life that a lot of us want. Find the right place to put us. Don't just leave us on the street.
People coming out of prison, those first few days and weeks are often a window of opportunity where people are really motivated. They want to move on in their lives. They're enthusiastic for change, want to move away from crime. But actually, too often, they can be released without support or without housing in place, which can really set them up to fail.
Former prisoners have told me they find it really difficult to get long-term housing after they leave prison.
to benefit from that, from the charges that energy companies make.
Dame Diana Johnson, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's coming up to 7:45, and we're reflecting this morning on a fantastic couple of weeks.
Yes.